Hey there, my fellow author. I'm Sarah Elizabeth Sawyer, an old soul kind of writer living my dream as a full-time author and authorpreneur. But I didn't start out living a confident, creative lifestyle. I struggled with the fears and the mental and emotional barriers that so often plague writers at all stages of their author career. But the truth is that with the right knowledge, tools, and training, you can overcome those barriers. I'm here to teach you how I've developed a lifestyle that's allowed me to publish 19 books and counting. Each week, as you tune into the Confident Fiction Author podcast, you'll get clarity on the steps you need to take to advance your writing career. Whether it's developing your ideal writing routine, tackling new skills like dictating your fiction, or overcoming the obstacles life throws your way, this podcast will help you live a more confident, creative lifestyle. Let's get started. Hey there, my fellow author, and welcome to this week's episode of the Confident Fiction Author podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Elizabeth Sawyer, and today I'm going to be talking about how you can break free from overwhelm by mastering essentialism for your author life. Now, you're probably familiar with the concept of minimalism, and I'll just say I'm not a diehard minimalist, but I am working to pare down my possessions without being obsessed with it. I consider myself minimal-ish. I am also an essentialist, and that's what I want to talk to you about today, is being an essentialist in your author lifestyle and the power of paring down your life to the most essential task so you can stop being overwhelmed by all of the to-dos and just really take time to be so that you can show up at your best to write your fiction. So in this episode, I'm going to cover 19 ways to practice essentialism as an author. And that is a lot, so I'm going to just touch on each of these. Every one of them could be their own podcast episode, but I'm just going to draw out a few points for each of these. And I want to credit the book Essentialism by Greg McKeown for the bulk of this list. And I just took what he had. At the end of the book, he included ways to start practicing essentialism in your life. So I took these things from that list and I'm going to apply them to you as a fiction author. So let's get right into those 19 ways to practice essentialism as an author, so that you can break free from overwhelm and live your best creative lifestyle. Let's get into it. The 19 ways to practice essentialism for your author lifestyle starts off with number 1, choose. We get to choose what we're doing each day. And sometimes I think we forget that, especially as authors. We tend to say things like, I have to write. I have to write 500 words. I have to write from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. every morning, when actually this is a choice. And so the next time you find yourself saying, I have to write, or I have to produce an author newsletter, or I have to do this task or another on your to-do list, instead replace it with, I choose to write, or I get to write. And you can apply this to whatever task that's in your life, but especially with writing. The fact that you're a fiction writer, it's a gift. It's a privilege to be a writer. And so embrace that. Take it out of the drudgery category in your mind of it's just something that you have to do. I have to write. You choose to write and you get to do it. Number 2, discern. This is where you ask yourself the question, what is the most important thing I can do today? For us as authors, that may be writing. You may have a lot of other things on your plate and your to-do list, but you want to take a little bit of time to discern, either when you're planning your week or just when you're getting started in your day. Discern what is the most important thing I can do today, and make sure you get it done. Number 3, trade-off. When the thought, I will do both, crosses your mind, I want you to stop, pause, and pick one of the choices. We have so many things that we can do every single day. And in our minds, I know it's the same for me. My mindset is so often I can get it all done. And especially if it's two really big projects and I put it down on my calendar that I'm going to do both of those things. Say it's write an author newsletter and read my pages and write out my feedback for my author critique group. Now, that might be your work for the day, but if you have those double booked in the same hour, say from 11 a.m. to lunchtime, and your thought is, I will do both of those, I encourage you to stop, pause, and pick one of the choices and put the other one off for tomorrow. Number 4, escape. This is one that I'm personally not great with, but it's something that I am planning on doing for 2025, and that's being much more intentional about scheduling personal time off-site, away from my house and my work, to explore what is really essential in my author life. And so that's number 5, escape. Planning that time, either a weekend getaway or just one night at a hotel where you can get off by yourself with some books and a planner and a journal to just really sort through what is essential in your author life without all of the noise and pressure of being at home or in your office and you're trying to think through these things. Number 5, look. Start an essentialist journal. Write only one sentence a day answering the question, what is the most important thing that happened today? I started this practice a couple of months ago, and let me just say, it is a pretty incredible reflection for just one simple question that you write one short sentence to answer it. I do this right before I'm going to bed, about an hour or so before I go to bed. I've laid my journal on my nightstand with a pen so that I'm not hunting for those whenever it's time to finish out my evening and my bedtime routine. So I take up my journal and write down the date and what day it is. And then I look at that question of what's the most important thing that happened today. And I reflect over the entire day and really pick out what was that most important thing. And I found that often it surprises me because I think about how productive I was. I think about all of my wins, which I also then, after I answer this question, I write down my 3 wins for the day. But it really makes me think hard about what was the most important thing in my life, in my author life, beyond just marking things off the to-do list? Like, what was that most important thing that happened today? And it may be that I got my fiction writing done, but other things that surprise me will be serving my family in a special way, like driving my cousin in for her cancer treatment, or just that I was fully present at the dinner table and having rich conversations with my family. And so when we think about being authors and our author lifestyle, it all ties in together. It's not just about writing and marketing and publishing and sales numbers. Those things are important every day, but doing this journal exercise where I answer that question with only one sentence, so I'm not writing out a whole journal entry to answer the question of what's the most important thing that happened today, just capturing that in one sentence brings my life into focus, and it keeps what's important in my life top of mind. And so that is number 5, look. Number 6 is play. And this is where you spend 10 minutes playing a game with a child and just losing yourself in the magical exploration that comes so easily to children. And I don't have kids myself, but I do have 11 nieces and nephews. They're all grown up and they're starting to have kids. And this past Thanksgiving, 2 of my great nieces were out, and I haven't gotten to spend a lot of time with them, but the oldest is 3 years old, and she was just running all around our yard and playing with my brother's dogs, and then she was grabbing up sticks and running with them, and I was like, oh, that may not be the best idea. We're going to poke an eye out. So I gathered her up, and I was like, have you ever thrown a stick in a fire? And of course, I looked to her grandparents, my brother and sister-in-law, for permission, and they were like, yeah, go for it. So I took her over to the fire pit, and we spent about 10 or 15 minutes just throwing sticks in the fire safely. I was teaching her how to do it, and she was so excited, ran off to go gather up more. And then we found ourselves going into the front yard and finding pecans on the ground, and I showed her the process of the pecan trees and found one that was cracked open so that she could see just this bit of creation and the creation process. And what I so enjoyed about that is those are things that are so normal for me and things that I enjoy too, but seeing it through her eyes and it being new, throwing a stick in the fire pit and collecting pecans, and just that sense of wonder and magical exploration that kids have. And honestly, I think we could all use more of that in our lives, but especially in our author lifestyles and our author career, because even if we're writing more serious fiction, suspense, or thrillers, there's always that wonder and exploration that it takes for us as fiction authors to craft these fantastical story worlds for readers to get lost in. And so I think the element of play is something that we need to make sure is in our author lives on a regular basis. Number 7, I personally love this one. I don't have any problems getting this in typically every day, and that is sleep. So your assignment on this one is very simple. Take a 20-minute nap today. Get that refreshment, let your brain rest so that you can come back to your writing refreshed. Number 8 is select. And so what I want you to do today is when something isn't a clear yes, make it a clear no. That's something that I can already count off a half a dozen times. I've done this month alone in January as we're kicking off 2025, where something came in my inbox. I wanted to say yes to it, but it wasn't a clear yes. It was one of those things that, well, if this were true, if that were true, could I make it work? And I'll give you a specific example of that. A friend of mine who I respect and I appreciate how he has promoted my books over the years and supported my author career, invited me to come up and share my books at an event that he's putting on with another author. And I really wanted to say yes to it. I wanted to go, but it wasn't clear because it did not fall in line with my goals and what I'm trying to do for this year. And I am not in any way saying that if something doesn't align with your goals, it's an automatic no. But I do know that this just isn't the season for me to take off on a weekend trip and load up a bunch of books in the car, because that would involve me now having to order books and carry inventory, which I don't do anymore. And I would have to make hotel reservations and get a presentation put together. And so while it's something I wanted to say yes to, it wasn't a clear yes because it didn't align with my goals. And so I had to make it a clear no. This also shows up in small ways throughout our day. Say a social media post comes across your feed and you're like, oh, should I comment on that? Do I want to get involved in that discussion or that debate? If it isn't a clear yes, then make it a clear no. Number 9 is clarify. Before you go into your next meeting, pause and ask yourself, what is the one thing I really want to achieve in this meeting? As authors, we're not in the corporate world. Typically, that may be part of your day job, but we do have meetings in terms of critique groups or maybe a membership that we're a part of that meets regularly. And I think a lot of times we show up at those meetings and critique groups and all without really knowing what we want to achieve in that meeting. I know back whenever I was in a critique group, I had a very specific reason for being there. I wanted feedback on my writing every single week. So I made sure I had pages printed out. That was the method we did then. So I had my pages printed out and I would show up and we would do critique. And we had a group of about 5 to 10, just depending on the seasons and what was going on. But there were some times when I was the only one who brought papers for critique. And after a while, a year or so of being in that group, I was wondering, why are some of you coming? You never bring writing for critique. It's almost just another meeting for them to go to. Now, I will say I completely appreciate them coming because they always offered wonderful feedback on my writing. And maybe that's what they wanted to achieve in the meeting. That was the thing, is they wanted to be there to serve, to pour into other writers, especially for me. That was my very early days of getting started. And so I was just sucking everything in like a sponge. So since then, though, I really look at whenever I'm going into a meeting, what do I want to achieve in this meeting? And it's a question that I now ask myself when I'm meeting with my mastermind group or whenever I'm going into any other type of meeting. I want to clarify what's the one thing I really want to achieve. Okay, so number 10 is dare. And this is one that, going back to that selecting when something isn't a clear yes, make it a clear no. Now you need to know how to say no gracefully. And so for this one, I want you to write it out, word it carefully, practice it so that when someone asks you for something and you already know it's a no, you have that answer ready for them and can deliver it gracefully, whether it's in person or in an email. So go ahead and write that no out gracefully, practice it, put it in the notes on your phone so that you can grab it and use it when you need. Number 11 is uncommit. So I want you to look at each commitment on your calendar for the week. Ask yourself, if I wasn't already involved, how hard would I work to get involved now? And I think that question is a really powerful filter for deciding what should be on your calendar and what should not be. And I'm going to actually do an episode on how to gracefully and respectfully get out of commitments that you really shouldn't have committed to in the first place, and you're finding yourself overwhelmed and unable to fulfill that commitment. So be watching for that in a future podcast episode on how you can respectfully and gracefully uncommit to projects, whether it's an anthology or a group blog. We'll cover that in a future episode. So if you're not already following the Confident Fiction Author podcast on your favorite podcast listening app, be sure and hit follow so you don't miss that episode. Moving to number 12, edit. A word that we as authors are familiar with, but in this instance, we're talking about editing your lifestyle. So you're going to use this new rule for one day. If you add a new activity, you need to edit out an existing activity to make space for it. So going back to the fact that if you're listening to this, you might be feeling a little overwhelmed. You're overwhelmed by your calendar, by your commitments, by your writing projects. It's time to get the red pen out and edit. And so specifically for authors, one of the things that we're so often tempted to do is when a shiny new story comes along, we want to get started on it. And before we know it, we have too many projects going on and nothing is getting finished. So with this new rule, I'm going to say if you add a new project, you need to edit out an existing one to make space for it. This could be a story that the one that you edit out could be a story that you started some years ago and you kind of come back in and out of it occasionally, but you're really not committed to finishing it. So maybe you need to just edit that out of your life so that you can add a new project in that you are excited about taking on. So that's number 12, edit. And that rule is if you add something new, you need to edit out something existing to make space for it. This also goes back to that minimalist idea of one thing in, one thing out. So every time you bring a new item into your house, one thing goes out. Number 13 is limit. The next time someone asks you to do something, pause and say, "Let me check my calendar and get back to you." This is so good, and I'm so grateful I started this years ago, especially when I was going to writing conferences or I was speaking at events. I would always have people make requests of me. They would ask if I could speak virtually to their group or if they could send me something for me to review by a certain deadline. And so I got in the habit of just saying, let me check my calendar and get back to you. Or I would tell them, send me an email with the details and I'll see what I can do. I will say where I've reached the point in my author career and online teaching that this is very limited. And a lot of times these requests, I just go back to that number 10 of how to say no gracefully, and I go ahead and give that no. If I already know that's going to be my answer, if I'm just not sure, it sounds like a great opportunity and I genuinely want to see if I can make it work in my calendar, I will still not commit and just say, let me check and get back to you. Number 14 is buffer. So if you're a planner, if you use a physical planner or Google Calendars or something like that, and you really plan out your days down to the minute, this is especially for you. I want to challenge you to add 4 30-minute, quote, appointments on your calendar every day for buffer. So this is time that you are setting aside to handle the unexpected problems and opportunities that come your way. And who doesn't have the unexpected every single day? So add those buffer times in there, put it right on your calendar, right in your planner, so that you have time to handle the unexpected each day and not let them overwhelm you. Number 15 is subtract. And this is when you face an obstacle today, instead of pushing harder against it, I want you to ask yourself, how can I remove this obstacle altogether? And what comes to mind for me with this one is whenever I'm in the editing phase of my novel, I'm doing my revisions, and I come across something that is just not working in the story. And I'm like, how do I get around this? How can I make it work? What can I change? What can I add to get it to work? And sometimes that will hang me up for days, weeks, or months in editing my manuscript, that I lose in productivity, and it just puts this cloud over my whole author lifestyle, and I'm not able to move forward in the story or in my next project with confidence because I'm so hung up on this obstacle. And what I have found works in the story and in life is, instead of trying to push harder against it, to solve it by sheer brute force, I most often need to ask myself, how can I remove this obstacle altogether? And what I often find with my story is simply removing the obstacle. Instead of trying to edit around it, make it work somehow, I simply remove it from the story. And in our life stories, in our author lifestyles, sometimes that's the best solution, is to simply remove an obstacle. Number 16 is progress. So this is specifically for when you're meeting with other people, asking that question, what has gone right since we last met? As an author, authorpreneur like me, those meetings may be just me, myself, and I. You can still apply this question, and in fact, I encourage you to do it. When you're sitting down and you're reviewing the past quarter, the past year, the past week, whatever it is, take those times to meet with yourself, sit down with your projects, and look back at what has gone right since the last time you sat down and made this kind of assessment. And that way you can clearly identify your progress. Number 17, flow. So starting with a blank 1-week calendar, I want you to design your dream routine, how you want to spend your time each week. And this is often called your ideal week or your perfect week. And while we don't hit that every single week, no one ever does, it gives you a template to follow for each week so that you're really hitting your flow, whether it's writing on your manuscript, doing your edits, doing marketing. Take time to design that ideal week or your dream routine for maximum flow throughout your week. Okay, we're almost there. Number 18 is focus. Pause once today and ask yourself, what's important now? I think we get so caught up, especially as authors, as creatives, with that constant question of what's next, what's next, what's next. Okay, I did that. Now what's next? And so the next time that question comes up, I want you instead to ask yourself, what's important now? This will keep you from looking too far out there and getting overwhelmed with all of your projects and to-dos, especially, like I said, if you've just finished something and you're ready to jump into the next thing. Just ask yourself, what's important now? And that will keep you focused and centered where you need to be in your day and in your projects. Number 19, the last one, be. I love what Michael Hyatt said one time. He said, we're not human doings, we're human beings. And that's something I quote to myself often as a reminder that it's not all about the to-do list and what am I doing? What do I need to do next? We need to take time to just be. And so for this one, the last one, number 19, is going back to that scheduling another time away to explore and reflect and dream and plan your ideal lifestyle as a confident fiction author. I love one of the quotes that Greg McKeown included in the book Essentialism, where he had the words of Peter Drucker in there that said, "Efficiency is doing things right. Effectiveness is doing the right things." And so with these 19 ways to practice essentialism in your author lifestyle, I want you to think about that. I want you to think about, as you're looking at trade-offs and uncommitting and editing things out of your life, subtracting things. Often we look at that as limiting ourselves, limiting the things that we want to do, especially when it's fun things, like for me, going off and doing a book event with a fellow author. And so we're tempted when we have to say no to some of those things or edit them out of our life. And so we find ourselves saying, I have to give this up. Or when you're looking at your calendar, you're asking, okay, what do I have to give up? Instead, I want you to turn that question around and ask, what do I want to go big on? So that rather than looking at it in a way of denying yourself, you're looking at what it is that you want to go big on and freeing your time and your schedule and your mental and emotional and physical energy and all the things you need to go big on that thing that you want to do. It may be publishing your first book. It may be going to your dream author conference or starting a new series. So just ask yourself, what do I want to go big on? And then apply the 19 practices that I laid out here so that you're able to do that. All right, my friend, I hope this was helpful for you and gave you some tools to help you break free from that overwhelm so that you can live your best author lifestyle. Again, most of these practices came from the book Essentialism. You can get a copy of that anywhere books are sold. And I also want to make sure that you have downloaded a free copy of the Confident Fiction Author Toolkit. You can get that at fictioncourses.com/toolkit. It's free. It has a list of some other books that I recommend reading to really help you develop that lifestyle of your dreams. And it also, bonus, has the essential tools that I use as an author. Again, that's over at fictioncourses.com/toolkit. I will see you next week for another episode of the Confident Fiction Author Podcast. Take care.